بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Well, it is a tremendous opportunity to have this kind of dialogue because in the first debate that I had with a representative of Islam was with Sheikh Shabir Ali, and we had a very large audience, 2,500, 3,000 people in Los Angeles, California. And the moderator said something at the beginning of that debate that I really appreciated. He said that if people are not allowed to argue, then they can only fight. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, so much of the dialogue that takes place between our communities doesn't really reflect the best that either side has to offer. And it often is based upon just trying to make one side look good and the other side look bad or something like that. And especially today in our world, we need to take advantage of every opportunity to increase the understanding we have of where the two sides are coming from and to try to raise the level of discussion.
As mentioned in Galatians 5, where Paul mentions, stand firm. You do not need the law. Stand firm. Do not go back into following the laws of the Torah, for you are free in Christ, hence you do not need the Torah. And I respect Dr. James because he had stood firm, as Paul is quoting, that you do not need the laws of the Torah. We're going to tackle the aspect of the Apostolic Council of Jerusalem. What has happened there is that Paul had abrogated the law, and James the Just, the original disciple of Christ, he did not have the same view like Paul that Paul had abrogated the laws of Moses. To put it in a Muslim perspective, for the Muslim viewer to understand, say we have somebody coming in the Muslim world, coming on the minbar, telling the Muslim world that we do not need the Quran, we do not need any dietary laws, and we do not need to circumcise anybody. And when you come to mosque next Friday, we all going to have pork chops for lunch. Can you imagine, Dr. White, what will happen? There will be a major eruption in the Muslim world that the gentleman is trying to abrogate the Quran or the laws of Muhammad. And that's exactly what happened in Acts 21, from verses 1 till 40. We will understand that there was a great debate, a great heated argument in the time of Paul against St. James. James the Just was the disciple of Jesus and the bishop of the Christian Jewish synagogue. And in the synagogue, they called Paul, summoned him to see and test, "Oh Paul, do you follow the law?" Now, Paul talked the talk, but he did not walk the walk. Paul's talk was, we're abrogating the laws of the Torah, we do not need a sacrifice as Jesus is the final sacrifice, hence we are free from the law. But James, the apostle of Jesus, did not believe that. Hence he summoned Paul to the temple, and when he came, Paul comes, James and the crowd meets him. Then they mentioned to Paul, we want to test you, we are hearing rumors from you that you have abrogated the laws of Moses. You going into the Gentile lands, telling the people that do not follow the Torah, leave on the Torah, the whole Tanakh, throw it in the bin, you only need the blood of Christ. And when it was told to him, Acts 21, verse 24, then take them and purify themselves with them and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou, that is Paul, thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. So Paul talked the talk that he doesn't need the law, but when James, the disciple of Jesus, put him to the test, asking Paul to show to the crowd, you accept the law of Moses or not, Paul buckled. He wasn't as strong as James. Paul buckled. And what happened? There was a Nazarene vow with 4 people. He took them to the temple the next day. He shaved their heads, paid the penance, offered the sacrifice. This whole instance of the Apostolic Council of Jerusalem destroys or puts a big stumbling block in Christianity. And you can try to answer it this way or that way, but the fact remains that 30 years or so after the coming of Jesus, James the Just kept the law as Jesus kept the law, whilst Paul destroyed the law, and when he was put to the test, Paul stumbled and succumbed to the pressure of James and followed the law. Just closing from the Quran is mentioned, وَقُلْ لِلَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ وَالْأُمِّيِّينَ أَأَسْلَمْتُمْ فَإِنْ أَسْلَمُوا فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ. So we are instructed from the Quran of the right that to instruct the people of the book, the Christians and Jews, and the unlettered people, to tell them to submit to the belief in one God. And if you do, you've been guided, and if you do not, we have given our message. يا ولد إسماعيل من رآني تنصرني بتنشير ما أقوله فإن بكة ومحمدا والأضاحي مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة وفي المناظرة اليوم تكلمي فلله الحمد والعزة ولقد رميت كلاما إلى الكفر فتقبل الله مني. Thank you for your time.
My name is Carlos Suka, and as you know that I will be moderating this evening. I also want to introduce the guest speaker, Maulana Ahmed Pandor, and I just want to read out a few things about Ahmed. He's a qualified Muslim scholar who specializes in comparative faith and interfaith dialogue. He's also the author of a book, The Concept of God's Mercy in Islam and Christianity, the subject matter of which is at the core of tonight's debate. Maulana Pandor's books and debates are available on the internet, so we want to welcome Maulana Ahmed Pandor tonight. I think give him and I would also want to just a brief introduction of Monka Jacob, who is also a lay Christian apologist and the director of Sophronis Mosque Ministries. Let's just give him a hand.
What happens in Acts 21 is that Paul comes before James, who is the elder at Jerusalem at the time. James then tells him that there's many. Paul brings all the good news. He's welcomed gladly. James tells him about all the Jews that have been saved in Jerusalem, but then tells him that there's a problem, that these are zealots. The Jews are zealous for the law, which God gave, by the way. And then he says to him that, what shall we do about this? Because they've been told about you by the false brethren that you abolish the law. Paul is then asked to take a Nazirite vow. Well, he's taken a Nazirite vow in Acts chapter 18, all right? And then in fulfillment showing the Jews there that he hasn't completely discarded what God had previously given, he then goes, and James tells him to pay for the taxes, the temple taxes of the 4 men. There's 4 men that have already taken a Nazirite vow that are now at their days of the fulfillment of separation. And so that's the whole background in it. Nowhere does it say that Paul relied on those sacrifices for justification. Paul understands and teaches justification by faith in all the texts, bearing on sin and salvation. My question to you, sir, is did Paul, in your opinion, rely on those sacrifices for forgiveness of sins?
In this passage, it was James and the people who were around Jesus who instructed Paul to make a sacrifice as such. I cannot say that this is very insignificant, because it's not Paul's actions. It is the actions of Jesus' brother, James the Just, the bishop of Jerusalem, who instructed Paul to make a sacrifice. And that was the time. You must remember, I'm saying it to enhance my view that the blood was not the only sacrifice. Because at that time, Paul would have said, hold on guys. We have the blood of Calvary, so you do not need another sacrifice. You do not need to shed blood or make a sacrifice to go to the temple. But behold, James instructed him to show to the crowd that Paul still kept the law of Moses. My point here is to mention that after Jesus left, the Jews and the semi-Jews and semi-Christians, or those that were half Christians, half Jews, still carried out the practice of sacrifice. I hope that answers your question, sir.